well, since we were touching upon different stakeholders here, let's now focus on the ones that are most talked about, and that is the investors themselves. And Andrea, I would turn to you now. In terms of the responsibility that investors hold in this regard, what is the role of social corporate responsibility? I works with employees that investors do, their families, local communities, society at large, to improve human life quality, the environment, and the economy, basically, in the long term.
How many days do we have for this question?
Well, let's start with minutes.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to join today's panel. Being a primarily commercial lawyer, I often deal with the investors and explaining what they can do and what they need to do to fit into the local framework. And dealing with a lot of foreign investors, I think it's just very difficult for them to navigate through the complexities of different levels of issues they need to deal with. Now, corporate social responsibility is not an aim anymore. It's not an objective anymore. We are far beyond that point. It has been enshrined deeply in day-to-day decision-making for most of the investors. And with ESG being the hot topic now, it should be an accessible performance outcome. And we all agree that that's still work in progress. It's very difficult to measure the standards and how do we get there. But it's an unavoidable aspect that every investor needs to look at. And I think that's where the problems come in. You've mentioned a lot of stakeholders, employees, families, wider communities, human rights, environmental. Now let's look at the governance part, the social part. We can look at this from different perspectives. One would be the general compliance with the law, but I think that's not enough anymore. It's not enough just to obey the law, so we need to take a step further. Fair labor practices. It also generally goes without saying that this is something that every investor would have to satisfy not only on the local level, but the group level, global, regional, and so on. It also comes down to environmental concerns. And I think those seem to be given most attention in terms of the corporate social responsibility, measuring, and so on. Why? Well, in my experience, it seems to be the easiest one to measure, the outcomes. So what does an investor expect from the state where the investment is supposed to be taking place? What kind of regulatory framework and so on? What are the other investment treaties? How do they treat this matter? Whether their investment will be protected in the context of any changes to the environmental laws. And this is where I'm going to mention something we've discussed earlier, the Ecuador versus Colombia case that seemed to be a groundbreaking case, right, very recent, in August 2022, where the environmental interests of the country were recognized as a legitimate interest to suspend mining activities of a Canadian company, right? So it's based on the bid between Canada and Colombia. And this new generation treaty included the carve-out for any compensation case of environmental concerns. But the tribunal seemed to disagree with both the agreement of the parties that there should be no compensation in this context because the reasoning for the suspension was the environmental issue, and it still awarded the compensation to the investor. Now we also have a different example, the David Avon versus Costa Rica case, where it was stated there was these carve-outs are applicable. So my point being here, how does an investor deal with the internal rules of corporate social responsibility, differing regulatory frameworks, and then differing practices? So yes, we do know that the things are progressing, they're moving slowly. It took us 60 years to get from point A to point B. But at the same time, I think what every investor needs to do is to understand the communities entering. And what Nia mentioned also regarding, for example, looking from a Bosnian perspective, the opportunities that were identified. At the same time, those opportunities do differ locally as well. In my personal experience, I work with a client who's a factory, so very much concerned environmental aspects of business dealings, a member of a global group, acting in different jurisdictions, involved in very environmentally friendly projects, and then the client slips, there is an incident, and there is an issue with the community. And they're a very good employer, so their employees, the employees' families do feel the good outcome of their engagement in the corporate social responsibility, not being just a tagline, but effective undertaking to do something for the community. And then there is the issue of the poor branding following one incident. So I think for every investor, and this is what we advise our clients, to try and understand what their investment exactly means, taking into account the specific circumstances of each and every community they're going to be entering. Cultural aspects, local legislation, local implementation of the legislation, interpretations of those, and then try to transpose the general view they have on the group level or in similar regions, neighboring countries, and try to make it more specific. This is the only way that they will be able to protect their investment truly, and to try to actually do provide some contribution to the community that they operate in.
Thank you very much, Andrea.